Hi guys, today I have a palette tag. This is called Best and Worst Palettes and it's Kaylee's palette tag. I personally don't know who Kaylie is, but I was tagged by Jacquelyn Lovene, which is so exciting. She's one of my favorite YouTubers and I have been seeing a lot of variations of a palette tag recently. I have never done a palette tag before and I didn't really want to do one without being tagged, even though I really like them, and now that I am tagged, I'm really excited to show you. I will link Jacquelyn's video down below, but yeah, let's just get into it. And I think something that's going to be fun about this that is also related to Jacquelyn's video is that I only own 3 eyeshadow palettes and 1 face palette. So this isn't going to be from the perspectives of someone who has 300 palettes and is like, oh, let me like pick out my favorite. At one point, I had a lot of palettes and I've tried many palettes throughout the course of my time with makeup. And I think it'll be interesting to hear the perspective of someone who tried a lot and got rid of a lot and, you know, kind of what that was like. Also, it's pouring rain. The weather here is so weird. I don't understand it, but if you hear little droplets, that's what it is. I personally think it's really nice. My roommate was like, oh, they're gonna hear the rain, and I was like, that's okay, I like the rain. So yeah, let's just get into it. Oh, and I tag all of you. I forgot to say that. I will have the questions down below, as well as some people that I tag, but if I don't specifically name you and you want to do this, consider yourself tagged by me. The first question is, what was your first palette? My first palette was the Stila in the Light palette. They do not make it anymore, and I just decluttered my last shadow from that. This was super popular when I was in 8th grade. That was many years ago. And I remember Zoella had it, and she was basically the only YouTuber for beauty that I watched. Probably the only YouTuber I watched. Okay, so you know how when the Naked palette came out, it was a cult classic and like that was the best palette and everyone was in agreement of it? That's what I thought the Stila in the Light palette was, because to me, Zoella was like a representation of everybody, and if she says something was the best and I thought that everyone agreed it was the best, I never thought to think, you know, oh, maybe it's not. I thought that's what it was. And it was a nice palette, however, some things of it were not very nice. Like the shimmer shades were nice, but one of the shimmer shades went bad on me within like a year, and it would crease on my eyes and it was awful. Even if I used a ton of primer, it was so weird. The mattes, okay, I made some mistakes because this was the palette that I got before I knew anything. So they said you can use this dry or wet. So I thought, ooh, wet. Let me like wet my brushes with water and dip it in the palette, which created this hard pan that like seeped into the whole eyeshadow. And I totally ruined one of the eyeshadows, or maybe 2. The matte shadows, they weren't that good, but at the time I wasn't using matte shadows. I wasn't creating these extravagant looks with mattes and shimmers. I would just put Stila Kitten or Stila Bubbly or the Sunset shade, which is the one that went bad, and I would just put that on my eyes and that was it. And I loved it at the time. I would never, if they came out with that again, I would never repurchase it. But yeah, it was nice for a beginner. Next question is your most recent purchase. Okay, so I kind of have 2 approaches because I haven't purchased an actual palette in a year. And that was the Modern Renaissance palette, but I want to talk about this a little later. So I purchased a Z palette also about a year ago, but the shades in this are all fairly new. These are all ColourPop shadows, ColourPop pressed shadows. Aside from that, I mean, obviously that's not ColourPop, but you can tell I really like these. Someone requested that I make a video showing you all the shades that are in here. Would you guys like that? Tell me, because I don't really want to do it if you guys don't want to see it. So please, if you're interested. That kind of brings me to my next point, which is I don't buy palettes anymore because I have so many what I think is so many shadows. These are all the shadows I own aside from like 3 singles, but that's a lot to me. And I have so many different colors, as you saw in this palette. Like, this is a wide variety of shades. At one point I was like, I only want neutral palettes, I only want neutral palettes. I'm not inspired by neutral palettes anymore. I don't know, I'm just not. I like to get creative. I think it's because for so long, like years, when I started wearing makeup, I only wore gold or like a shimmery champagne on my eyes, and that was it. And now I'm like, never again. Like, I need variation. So yeah, these are the most recent purchases, and I didn't buy them all at once. I think I made 3 ColourPop orders because I bought a couple and then I liked them and I bought some more and then I bought some more, and now this is complete and I have no interest in buying any more ColourPop shadows. This is a complete palette to me and I love it. I highly recommend their eyeshadows. Next is the palette that got away, so one you regret missing out on. Now, I don't have one, but I thought that I would talk about something that might be controversial, but I don't care. It's a limited edition palette that I have that I think other people might have missed out on, and it was one of those palettes that was talked about one time on someone's channel, like, this is the best thing ever, and then never again because it's limited edition and people, like, can't talk about limited edition palettes. This is the Anastasia Nicole Guerrero Glow Kit. As you can tell, I love this thing. I have big dips in these. I have pan on this. This is the only shade I can't use because it's too dark, but to me, if there are 5 ginormous highlighters and I can't use the 6th one, that's okay. I remember that when this came out, I had always wanted a glow kit, but the reason I never bought them was because half the kit I couldn't use. They make these glow kits so that it's like for every skin tone, but then it's like if you're super pale, you can't use 2 of the shades. If you're super deep skin tone, you can't use 2 of the shades. When this came out, I was like, finally, I can use all, except for this, all these shades, and that's awesome. And I remember watching, I don't know who it was, I can't remember the name, but I remember watching someone's review. Okay, can we just talk about for a second how people say review, but it's a first impression? A review is when you use something a lot and then you review it. Anyway, I watched someone's review, first impression, and they were freaking out and they loved this palette and I bought it, and if you guys watch my channel, you know that I decluttered every single highlighter except for these and one mini thing I'm trying to use up. Literally, I was like, screw all my other highlighters, I like this one. No one talked about this. It wasn't even in anyone's favorites videos. It was literally only in those review first impression videos and then never again. And that really angers me because it's like, if this was so good, you could have at least talked about it one time in one video, but it was one of those things where, you know how big YouTubers get so much PR that they get something and it's shiny and it's new and it's pink and sparkly and then they use it twice and then never again, and that's what happened with this palette and all these bigger YouTubers. And for me, like, this is my baby. I love this. And I don't know, I think that, I think it should be paid more attention to with all those people who got that PR package who now never look at this again because they don't want to recommend it. And I understand that. Someone commented recently on my video saying like, oh, I hate when people don't use limited edition stuff. I agree with that if you're a smaller YouTuber. If you have 2 million subscribers, you don't want to be using this and 2 million people can't get it. But yeah, I don't know, I don't really understand. The next thing is one palette that makes you happy to look at. Now, I actually don't have this one because I decluttered it, because I never actually used it. It just made me happy to look at it, which is very interesting because usually with a product, if I don't use it, it gives me so much anxiety and I hate to look at it and I want to declutter it right away. But with this palette, it was so cute that I was like, oh, whatever, it's so cute in my collection, and it is the Chocolate Bonbons palette. I will put it right here. I recently sold this to one of my friends. It was basically untouched. It had pan in 2 of the shades, so those 2 shades were touched. But aside from that, I didn't use it that much. That's the only Too Faced palette I've ever tried, but based on that, I don't want any more Too Faced shadows. It just was not good. The matte shades never blended. The shimmery shades were not at all metallic, but it was so adorable. And the names like Mocha Chip and I don't know, just all these cute names. It makes you want to buy it. I understand, like, they're really good. And some people say, oh, well, it's too young. I mean, I don't care about that. I just thought it was really cute. And I'm not recommending it to anyone. I think it's garbage. I honestly, truly think that palette is garbage. But that's how they get you. It's with that packaging. The next is one you've changed your mind about. So for that, I would have to go with the Naked palette. And I feel like you all know what I'm going to say because a lot of people say this. This was super popular. I bought this when I was a sophomore in high school. It was the only palette I used for so long. This is what it looks like. You all know. I do have a lot of pan on it. Actually, only one of the pans is from that time. All the other ones have been more recent. But I used to absolutely love this, and I used it every single day. And what I didn't realize was that I only used like 4 of the shades. I didn't love this as a whole. I loved Sin and Sidecar and Half Baked and Smog, and some of those I didn't even love all that much. But you know, at the time I was happy with this. I wasn't doing big eyeshadow looks. As I said, I would put one matte shade in the crease, one on the lid, nothing on my lower lash line, that was it. Now, this does not inspire me. First of all, these shadows here at the end, I'll use Dark Horse and Hustle. I'm actually wearing this today because it's my 1 month 1 palette. I have Half Baked and Smog, Half Baked on the lid and Smog on the outer, and then I have Naked and Buck in the crease and Dark Horse in the crease. And I just would never gravitate towards some of these shades, and I used like Sidecar. That's all from when I was in high school, when I got this palette. Like, that was my favorite. I probably wore that every single day. And at the time, I was fine with that, and that made this my favorite palette. Now, I don't want to wear one shadow every single day, and liking one shadow in a palette, I see through the transparency of that. Like, that doesn't make a shadow good. That's a reason not to buy a shadow if you only like a couple shades. I'm not saying I just like Sidecar. I do genuinely like all these shades. It's just they don't inspire me. The next question is, what is one palette that surprised you? And this immediately came to my mind, the Lorac Pro palette. I watched so many YouTubers say this was the best thing ever. It reminded me a lot of the Naked palette and the Steal It in the Light palette, except that it had a lot of matte shades. It has a shade like Gunmetal. All these neutral palettes used to have a shade like that, and like this Hustle shade, like a dark purple, like shades that you wouldn't now ever think to put in neutral palettes, but for some reason they were in all the old neutral palettes, and I don't know why. I wanted that palette for so long, and I asked for it for Christmas, I believe junior year of high school, I think. And I absolutely hated it. The metallic shades, aside from a couple, were not that metallic. They did not inspire me. The mattes, I don't know if it was because they were cool toned. I think they were, but they looked terrible on my eyes. They looked muddy, and basically I just couldn't get more than like one look out of that palette. I remember trying to use that palette consistently for a week, and I remember saying to my boyfriend, who was just my friend at the time, I remember saying, like, this is making me sad. Like, literally using this palette is making me sad. You know, he was my best friend, so I would talk to him about makeup, and he was like, then don't use it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I did a stupid thing where I depotted the shades because I was like, oh, if I depot them, and at the time I had nothing in my Z palette, so I was like, oh, I want matte shades. I didn't realize that I didn't like the matte shades. I thought that I just didn't like the layout of the palette, so I was like, let me depot the matte shades into my Z palette, and then I don't have to buy any matte shades for my Z palette. Well, I quickly learned that I actually didn't like the shades. It wasn't just the layout. So then I decluttered more and I decluttered more, and I wish I had just sold the whole palette or given the whole palette away. I learned a lesson, and I've learned lessons through all these palettes. You know, next time if I have a palette, and that's what I did with the Chocolate Bonbons palette. I could have easily said, let me depot 3 of these shades. But why? I was never going to use them, so instead I gave it to a friend. And yeah, I wish I had done that with the Lorac palette, but that definitely surprised me. I don't know why it gets so much hype to this day. I really don't understand. The next palette is the palette that inspires you the most, and that would have to be my Z palette, and that's because I made it. I made this thing. Like, I made it to be inspiring. I picked, you know, this is like my pink and purples row, oops, this is, and then I have like my orange row, and then all these brown shades. I use these, like, if I need a quick eye makeup look, I just throw like 4 browns on my eyes and that's done. I got a comment saying, like, what are you wearing on your eyes? It looks so good. And it's so funny because that look took me like 2 seconds, not 2 seconds, probably like 5 minutes, because I just like put browns in different places and was like, this looks good. Yeah, and I have some really fun shades. Like, this shade is called Come and Get It by ColourPop, obviously, and it's like a pink peach like duochrome, and it's amazing and it's crazy. And I do prefer mattes. There are only 4 shimmers in this, and one of them is kind of bad, but I kind of like it anyway. We can talk about that if I make a video about these shades. But yeah, this is just so inspiring, and it's funny because some of these shades I haven't even used yet. Like, I used this was my summer palette, so this was the only palette I used for 3 months. 3 months. And yet some of them I haven't touched yet because I haven't gotten around to the looks, and I know I will, but yeah, there's just so much I can do with this. I love this. I really recommend buying a Z palette and buying your own shadows. If you find yourself buying a bunch of different palettes because they have 1 or 2 shades that are different in your collection or something that inspires you, I really recommend buying a Z palette and just buying singles. Don't buy a whole palette for 2 shades that inspire you. Buy an empty palette and have every shade inspire you. The next is one on your wish list. Now, like I said, I don't buy palettes. I don't really have anything on my wish list. There's one thing that Laura May Beauty was talking about recently by Huda Beauty, and it's like a purple palette, and that did catch my interest. Am I gonna buy it? No. No, I'm not. But did it catch my interest? Yeah, it did. It's beautiful. Okay, so the next question is your no-fail palette. Now, I was debating which one to talk about because I have the Modern Renaissance, and as you can see, I have a lot of pan on this, and I think that before I got my Z palette, this was my no-fail palette. And I'm not saying it's not. Like, if I pick this up, any look I do, I'm satisfied with. I know that I can make a really neutral look with just some browns. I can make a more like cool toned look, which is what I did when I got to college for like 2 weeks. I just did these 2 shades. And I know that I can make a more red tone, a more orange tone. Like, this is a no-fail palette in the sense that you're never going to fail with your makeup, but I think my personal no-fail palette is, again, my Z palette, and that's because I made it. Like, I made this thing. If I was a makeup brand and I could sell this as a palette, I totally would. Not that I'm saying this is like the perfect way to place all of them or whatever, but there's only a couple shades that I don't use in here, like probably 2, and besides that, I don't know, I just picked this up, and I think the reason this is no fail is because it always inspires me. Like, the Modern Renaissance, even though it's no fail, it doesn't always inspire me. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't know, not to say it always does, but I feel like more recently, since I got my Z palette and I filled it up, this has been harder to get inspiration from, and I'm not bashing it. I love this palette, you guys know that. If you find yourself buying a lot of palettes saying, oh, maybe this one will be the one, maybe this one will be the one, I feel like an infomercial. Stop searching. Literally, stop searching. Just buy a Z palette, buy your own shadows. I like to buy ColourPop shadows, 1, because I love them, and 2, because they're cheap. They're usually on sale for $4 each, which is great, and you can get like promo codes and coupons and deals, and just sign up for their email list and you'll get a coupon like right away. That was it for this tag. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did a Halloween tag like 3 years ago, but besides that, I've never done a tag, and it was really fun. And I've been watching Jacquelyn Lovene and Laura May Beauty and a couple others just kind of bring back tags, and I think it's really nostalgic and it's nice. So yeah, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. And that's all. I'll see you guys very soon. Bye.